So then, I hope you've all had an absolutely fantastic Christmas, because it's time to review the third and final of our 3 crystally themed weapons. This one, once again, not only comes at an early hard mode progression point, it can also be a fantastically viable option for you mages, when leaving the question of which one to go for. And if I'm honest, today we may have a serious competitor. Of course, I'm talking about the Crystal Storm. Being a spell tome like the other weapons does change up its obtainability slightly. However, this doesn't necessarily mean it's any harder to get a hold of, so today's all about its performance. Before we do jump into it though, if you enjoy these weapon reviews, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, as it truly helps out the channel. Okie dokie, let's see how you can actually get it. As mentioned, the Crystal Storm is in fact an early hard mode weapon, meaning as soon as you defeated the Wall of Flesh, you can go and progress towards this thing straight away, first requiring you to head underground in your new hallowed biome. Once you're there, very simply we need to grab 20 crystal shards to start, which to be honest, in a world that's been up for a while, is no problem. But if your Halla is completely new, you may have to sleep in a bed to progress time a bit for them to start growing plentifully. Once you've got that, don't go anywhere, because we also need 15 Swords of Light from the same biome. Now, Swords of Light are one of those crafting materials I think everyone needs in early hard mode, so while you could just farm for them organically, and just casually get a nymph banner as you do, like last video, I would create a proper layer farm instead, as you'll probably be farming down here a lot in your whole playthrough. Right, once you've got your 15 souls, all that's left is a singular spell tome, which can be conveniently purchased by the wizard NPC, which by this point, you probably would have already bumped into underground, with them appearing in your cavern layer after entering hard mode. Okay, once you've gathered everything, head to a bookshelf and craft out a lovely old Crystal Storm book. Okay then, let's see how it fares, shall we? The Crystal Storm is an extremely classic Terraria weapon, been introduced in 1.1, without its fast-firing functionality changing since release. Now, DPS-wise, things are off to a pretty good start, with it sticking around the 200 mark from a range of distances on a single target. Also, as always with this weapon, its wall of tiny crystals can bounce off walls, allowing you to hit targets using tactical trajectories. The only real negative of its use to keep in mind is its mid-range. But honestly, in real scenarios it isn't much of an issue, and compared to the likes of the other crystal weapons on single targets, it beats the Vile Shard and matches the Crystal Serpent. But of course, things are a little different against lines of enemies, with the Vile Shard dominating as pair, and unfortunately the Crystal Storm not benefiting in any way due to its absence of piercing, making even options like the Cursed Flames, its corruption alternative, a much better option. Or is it? Because there is actually one thing I think might make the Crystal Storm infinitely better against the real thing. You see here, while its time to kill on this large group of mummies isn't anything spectacular, its extreme fire rate combined with its average knockback allows you to essentially stun lock enemies in place, making them in some ways less of a threat than if you were to be using the Crystal Serpent. Now, yes, this is still inferior to the Vile Shard in this scenario, but you've got to remember that this thing will also do well against single targets, meaning that if you want to take down a biomimic with this thing, you'll have a much easier time, with it in practice taking one down so much quicker than the aforementioned Vile Shard. But you know, this is just plain old enemies, so what about bosses? Well, against the very fitting boss, the Queen Slime, the Crystal Storm is more than capable at taking it down, with its range not really being much of an issue. The only thing to really keep in mind is the amount of mana you go through this thing, so just make sure you're set up for this before the fight. Now at this point, I kind of know what you've all been thinking. It's gonna suck against the Destroyer, and you are kind of right. You see, with no piercing qualities, the most you can do to this giant snaky boy is about 1000 DPS, which while could be much worse, is honestly just worth switching to another weapon like the Vile Shard to get the job done in a jiffy. And you know, while it may have let us down a little here, against the other bosses I actually found it a joy to use, essentially just being a point-and-click ranged weapon that deals similar DPS out of the Shadow Flame knife. With the right mobility, you should easily be able to make it to Plantera with this thing. And speaking of Plantera, you can totally go for it if you want to use this weapon. But unless you feel like giving yourself unnecessary challenge, just grab something else at this point, because as soon as you get to Golem, you're going to be dealing peanuts of damage anyway. So, what else can the Crystal Storm do for you? Well, with its surprisingly good crowd controlling abilities thanks to its high knockback output, I found it to be an absolutely amazing weapon for events and invasions. So I guess the only real question is at this point, do you go for this over the Vile Shard or Serpent? And well, with it having what I think is the easiest and most simple obtainability out of the 3, it really depends on your current situation. If you've already got a well-established fishing infrastructure, just go for the Serpent. But if you want to play it safe and you don't need a destroyer cheese, the Crystal Storm will do you swell. This has been sockrteez, and I'll see you in the next one.